We're stepping into the dark today to talk about the 7 deadly sins. But forget the ancient religious rules you were taught. They aren't punishments, they're actually psychological maps. They trace the complex defense mechanisms of the human mind, showing exactly how we hide from our deepest fears.
Right from the start, we have to face a really uncomfortable truth. These ancient patterns, they aren't moral defects. They're protective strategies, desperate moves the mind makes to guard itself from perceived threats. And today, we're descending entirely into one specific, terrifying abyss: greed, a psychological hunger that can never truly be satisfied.
The ancient psychological shadows. Let's look at where this actually comes from beneath the surface.
So greed isn't just an excess of desire. We kind of tell ourselves that, right? To make it seem like a simple character flaw. But it's actually a terrifying psychological defense mechanism. It's an emotional dependence on accumulating things, just to mask this profound internal void. It covers up a deep, terrifying fear of nothingness. The mind gets convinced that fulfillment is always just beyond the next gain. It actually believes that acquiring one more thing will finally quiet the panic inside.
So the mind creates this incredibly powerful emotional illusion. It whispers a really compelling lie, telling you that the next gain will finally bring you peace, that possessing things equals security. But the reality, the dark truth, is that chasing fulfillment out there in the world only carves out a deeper emptiness inside you. The next gain doesn't satisfy. It literally just resets the hunger. It stretches the void wider, meaning you need even more just to feel whole.
The illusion of scarcity. Let's see how this illusion takes hold.
If you look back at human history, you find a massive evolutionary glitch. In the ancient past, hoarding was just biological survival. Scarcity was real. Winter was coming, and resources were finite. But today, that primal urge has twisted itself into a modern psychological trap. We aren't hoarding to survive the winter anymore. We hoard as emotional compensation. We stockpile money, power, and objects to build walls against an imagined threat. And the only future that guarantees is a state of chronic dissatisfaction, a permanent state of wanting.
Which brings us to something pretty unsettling about modern life. What we often look at as intense, praiseworthy ambition in our society, it's actually a mask. It's a frantic attempt to fill a psychological emptiness. Society claps for the relentless pursuit of wealth and calls it drive. But beneath that drive is usually an internal scarcity mindset, a quiet voice constantly whispering in the dark that you're just never enough. It's an unfillable void masquerading as success.
The addiction to more. Let's break down the biology of this endless wanting.
The sources show how the brain's reward system creates a chemical trap. It's a devastating loop. First, the craving, a psychological itch demanding to be scratched. Second, acquisition, a brief flash of victory. Third, the inevitable, rapid drop of the fading high. The object loses its shine almost instantly. And fourth, the terrifying return of the void. The mind becomes entirely hijacked by a cycle that guarantees enough will never actually feel like enough. The pursuit just becomes biological.
Notice how the anticipation stage here overpowers everything else. Anticipation actually becomes more powerful than possession itself. Your dopamine pathways start celebrating the reward in advance. The thrill is entirely in the chase. And this fuels a neurobiological addiction, not to the object, but to the endless pursuit of it. You're chasing a ghost, totally addicted to the feeling of almost having the prize. 0. That is exactly how much lasting satisfaction you get at the end of this cycle. Because the brain adapts so fast, it builds a callous, unbreakable tolerance. Just like a narcotic, soon it requires increasingly extreme, grandiose gains just to feel a fleeting sense of normal. What thrilled you yesterday, you barely notice it today. You can't outrun the void. It always returns, larger and hungrier than before.
The trap of pursuit. This is where the hunger gets incredibly dark.
When this hunger reaches its most extreme form, it manifests in some really dangerous individuals. Think of the corporate psychopath. They use superficial charm to disguise their emptiness. They lie pathologically to secure their next target, and they completely lack empathy. To them, other humans are just objects, tools to be used, broken, and consumed in a relentless addiction to power and dominance. The pursuit of more just completely overrides their humanity.
It's this overwhelming desire to acquire more, intimately paired with the chronic dissatisfaction of never having enough. For these people, the thrill of outwitting and conquering others becomes an intoxicating drug. It's the only conceivable way they can momentarily quiet their own terrifying fear of lack. They don't hoard power because they're strong. They hoard it because they are profoundly, psychologically terrified of being weak.
the unfillable psychological void. Let's look at the final destination.
This is the trap of the hedonic treadmill, a kind of psychological purgatory. Every single new acquisition instantly loses its shine the moment you possess it. It simply becomes your new mundane baseline. Yesterday's luxury is today's bare minimum, and it leaves you entirely emotionally dependent, anxiously trembling, waiting for the next hit of accumulation, just running furiously in place, terrified of what will happen if you ever stop.
So, how does the mind hide this darkness from itself? Through rationalization. It's a blinding defense mechanism, a self-deception meticulously built to justify the endless pursuit. Because the rational brain is hijacked by the emotional void, it spins these elaborate stories about legacy, security, and necessity. It hides the pathetic emotional desperation beneath a cold mask of logic, convincing you that the sickness is actually the cure. Take a moment and quietly reflect on your own internal scarcity mindset right now. Are you desperately chasing fulfillment in external things? Look closely at your ambitions and the things you cling to. Ask yourself, are you truly in charge of your choices, or are you being violently dragged through life by your desires? Are you building a life, or are you just feeding a ghost?
And that leaves us with one final, unsettling realization about the human mind and the true nature of this darkness. A truth that strips away all the illusions of ambition and success. Greed does not grow because you have too little. It grows because nothing can fill what it is trying to feed.